podcast show First Name Basis, where we sit down with TribalScale employees and special guests to have an authentic and unscripted conversation on a variety of tech and innovation topics. My name is Trisha. I am the Senior HR Coordinator at TribalScale. My favorite question is, what's my job? Basically, my job is internal employee relations and everything that happens after recruitment happens. So that's what I do here. I also have a few folks in the room joining me, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Cool. My name's Ainan. I'm an engineering manager here at TribalScale, and what that means is on top of doing my regular delivery work, which is coding specifically on iOS projects, I also help manage other engineers on my team.
So my name's Lawton. I'm also an engineering manager here at TribalScale. The only difference between myself and Ainan is he works on iOS and I mostly do back-end work.
Cool. My name is Leo. I'm a manager for the product management team here at TribalScale. So just like Lawton and Ainan, I'm more involved in also the people management side of things on top of the normal work that we kind of do as product managers here at TribalScale. I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but...
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. So today's episode features a few of our original TribalScale hires. So they are our OG squad. We'll be sharing some stories about how TribalScale was in the beginning and how it's become a global innovation partner today. They'll also be giving our listeners some insight into lessons on what they've learned and a few career pointers. So we'll just get started with a few questions. So first and foremost, why did you join TribalScale? We'll kick it off with Ainan.
Sure, yeah. So, we've all started kind of around the same time, which was around 3 years ago. TribalScale was founded in November 2015. In terms of why, mine was a little bit unique of a story. So, like many folks, I graduated from university or whatever post-secondary education you did, and I really had no direction in what I wanted to do. And so I was working at Scotiabank in a technology role, not really understanding what I wanted to do long term, but as a first job out of school, it was really cushy and the pay was quite nice, but it really wasn't the place for me. And so when I ultimately decided to leave, I took some time off to travel a bit, and I was always into technology, the internet, gaming, and gadgets, like when I was growing up. So I knew I wanted to do something in tech. And so when I came back, I started networking and looking for opportunities in that area. And my brother worked with Sheetal at Extreme Labs and introduced me, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lawton?
So I have a kind of a crazy story for mine. I was working in Calgary at an oil and gas software consultancy company. And it was a very cushy job, a lot of dinners with clients, but I realized I wasn't really learning anything new. I was working with older technologies. I was building expertise in something that I didn't really care about. And so I did something crazy where both my siblings were living here in Toronto, and my brother's roommate had just moved out. He said Toronto's a great city, so I actually drove across Canada.
Did you use a Bug or a Beetle or one of those vans?
No, I used my stepdad's SUV, much less cool. And I got here, and within a week or so, I met Josh at a Tech TO, and then from there, a couple after Christmas holidays, I started at TribalScale.
Cool. I have an even crazier story. So I was already in Toronto and I kind of knew everyone already. So I've been actually in the services industry at Extreme Labs and Pivotal for quite some time now. I've worked kind of indirectly with kind of Josh and the founding team for quite some time, and I kind of heard through the grapevines that they were kind of starting something new, so something that kind of caught my interest. I think for me, being at like a big organization like Extreme and Pivotal at the time after we got acquired was I felt more like like a cog in the machine. It was like the impact I had was less and less, and I really wanted to kind of go to a place where I'd be more challenged and be able to like have a more impactful role in what I do, and also help kind of build something up from the ground up. So that's why I was like, let's take a risk, let's try something new. The blueprint was, again, something really similar to what I've been doing, but again, it's that kind of challenge and opportunity.
Whenever I onboard new hires, I always make the joke that if you pass your first 5 months here, you're basically one of the co-founders. But these lovely people have been here since the beginning. So it really follows up to my next question, which is, how has TribalScale changed?
Let's start on this side.
I think, the most obvious change is definitely the size and scale of our company. I think with that kind of growth and change in our company, I think we've matured a lot too as a business. I remember, back in our day, small startups were like super scrappy. It can be kind of like chaotic at times, but in a good way. Like, we're still successful. But fast forward till now, it's everything is more structured and organized. We're definitely more strategic in kind of what we do and how we approach things, both internally, externally, and I think that gives us a good structure for us to continue to grow and be successful. And I really think the ceiling is even higher than before in terms of what we can accomplish.
So I pretty much am going to piggyback on what Leo said. The obvious thing is just the size. You don't know everyone now. When we first started, I think all of us, there wasn't really even the idea of departments. It was everyone in one room. So, and there were a lot of people doing a lot of different responsibilities, which was both exciting and super hectic. If you had a problem, you didn't really know who to go to because nobody had a defined role. But in the same way, there was a lot of excitement around that.
Yeah, I think before, like, everyone just wore like many hats, whereas now we're able to kind of focus on our interest and specialty and grow that particular craft more and more.
Kind of growing up all together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing really to add. Just would like to piggyback on what they said, and it's really like that scrappy kind of hustle where you're wearing different hats. You don't know who to go to. But you just figure it out along the way, and that's where a lot of the learning and growth opportunities were. Maybe it wasn't specific to engineering and writing code, but we just learned so much about random stuff and just got stuff done, which was awesome.
Do you miss that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Totally. And like, we still have that culture here where we want to empower people to go out and do things, whatever it is that they want to do. But since there are so many defined roles, there may already be someone doing it. But what I like to encourage with my reports and even for myself is to like go and reach out to those departments to collaborate with them and make something happen, right? Because that's how we've always tried to do it, and that's how we try and do things here.
Yeah, the nice thing about here is that, there might be somebody else working on it, but everyone is so collaborative. It's like, no, it's not just that person's role. It's everyone can kind of get their hands on, do it together, which is really great. Yeah, okay. So our next question is, what is the biggest fail-fast moment of your career? Ainan?
Sure, yeah. So I was thinking about this one, and I wanted to find something like really specific related to a project that I worked on. So there's like engineering related, and so I remember having a big release for a client project, and we had worked months and months on like different features to go into this release. And a week before RC, which is the release candidate, when we basically do a feature freeze and only do like bug fixes and polish, that we decided to kind of tweak one of the features we worked on, which one of the engineers on the team wanted to refactor. And being kind of like the engineering lead on that team, I always want to empower my team and be like, yeah, go ahead and do it, and give them that autonomy. However, after refactoring, what they changed was like it touched a lot of different parts of the code, which then when we went into testing caused a lot of regressions and bugs and actually delayed our release by a couple of weeks. And it was a really stressful, crazy couple of weeks. So I would say there's multiple learnings from that. So one is don't do large refactors right before you're about to release. The second would be unit test your code. So if you are changing things, you can see what's breaking. And lastly, don't chunk all your features into a large release and release and go to market faster. So that would be a pretty big one for me.
It's a big learning curve.
Yeah. Now we can laugh about it, but we weren't laughing about it then. That's for sure.
How about you, Lawton?
I have one where, so one of the projects that I worked on, we were building out a part of one microservice in a much larger ecosystem, and we had a small team here, and then the client was overseas. So we had a pretty small communication channel. They were on a very different time zone than us. And one thing that we had a plan when we started the engagement that we would really focus on building out the feature set and trying to keep the code clean while we really got a solid image of what we were going to build. And we were planning to optimize nearer to the end of the engagement, but we didn't really communicate this with the client. And so we go to bed and we wake up and the client's freaking out because one of their engineers decided to load test our application and they found all of these bottlenecks. And we were aware of the bottlenecks. We just were our schedule in our minds, schedule that wasn't communicated to anyone was, we'll deal with this later. So everyone calmed down when we had the conversation and got on the same page with our plan, but I think we could have really skipped a lot of the headache and stress if we had just communicated and really over communicated from the get-go.
Any to add, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, mine's definitely not as deep and a little bit maybe stupid, but it was a good learning. So it's surrounding actually like meeting logistics. So I remember this one time I was working with a client where their office was actually just like 30 minutes away, and normally we would kind of go and visit in person for like major stand-ups and retros and so forth. And there was this one meeting where, again, I had the calendar invite as in their office, but for whatever reason, they thought it was going to be in our office. So me and the rest of the engineering team traveled all the way to their office. We got there, we're like, hey, we're here. And they're like, wait, what? We're at your office? So I was like, oh, God. So, I mean, the lesson there is like always, doesn't hurt to clarify and don't make assumptions and just like, just reiterate, especially when it comes to anything project related or meetings or anything.
Yeah, I think like the common theme with all of ours is communication.
Yeah.
Like for me, I think, communicating, like I mentioned when I was anchoring that project, I like to give autonomy to the engineers to, if they want to refactor something, to go for it, but maybe communicating how like important that time was before we went to RC, and also, to help them understand that, the code maybe isn't tested, or like these are the possible risks for doing it now. And if that wasn't communicated to them properly, maybe they thought it was a good idea to go ahead and do it. So, I mean, communication is super important in anything, right?
Such a cliche thing to say. Communication is
but it
key.
Is.
But
That's
it is key.
It
it's
is
the best thing and
the
biggest thing.
And it's something that it's an art, right? It's not like you can do these like three things and all of a sudden be good at communication. It's like a lifelong skill that you can never really master.
Yeah. Every morning during stand-ups, we have something called fail fasts, and we talk openly about our challenges and any roadblocks we faced and how we moved on from it. And I think every single day someone always hits on communication and over communicating. So I don't think anyone has quite perfected it yet, but it's something we can all learn from. Awesome. So this is personally my favorite question, but how do all of you think companies can effectively retain employees and keep them happy and validated in the tech community specifically? And then twofold, why are you still at TribalScale?
Cool. I guess I'll start. So how I think companies can effectively retain employees. So, I mean, as a manager, I wouldn't view it so much as retaining employees, but I'll kind of give you how I think about it, which is the foundation of good management is building a real relationship with your report. And so just like any relationship in your life, whether it's your spouse or a friend, they're all based on the same core pillars like trust, honesty, communication, respect. And so that's something that you have to build with your report, and there's no like shortcut to actually doing that. You just have to put in the time. You have to communicate and build that up to the point where you actually understand who they are as a person and what they value. And once you can understand what they value, then you can start thinking about what makes them happy and what they're looking for in their career. And then tailor or look at their career plan in terms of how it may fit with the company, right? And so if it does fit in with the company, that's great, and you can see how they can grow at TribalScale. But the reality is sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay too. And we really want to play the long game in the sense that, maybe there's no fit right now, but that doesn't mean you can't work with them down the road, whether it's at TribalScale or somewhere else. But the problem with just focusing on retaining the employee, maybe you're not being true to them or what they value, and over time they may start resenting you or the company, and then they're just not going to produce good work, and then it hurts the company, it hurts their career, so it's overall a lose-lose. So I think the best way is just to really focus on what works for them and not necessarily what works for the company.
So as a manager, what are some of your key tips and tricks on not necessarily retaining, but just keeping your employees validated and engaged in their roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like always giving quick bits of feedback is good. So, if you heard through their PM that they maybe did a good job in a certain meeting with the client or something else, like I would just go quickly out of my way to be like, hey, I heard about this from Leo. That's like how we want to work at TribalScale. That's awesome. Like, let's do more of that, and give them a pat on the back. Alternatively, if Lawton says, you know what, when we were pairing, they just weren't listening to my idea, I'd go and say, hey, listen, that's not how we pair. That's not how we work. And here's why. And here's what we can do to get better. And just like having constant check-ins with them is important. But at the end of the day, they're really not going to listen to what you have to say unless you build that foundation first, which is the relationship.
Yeah. Anything to add, Leo?
Yeah, I think when it comes to people management, the one thing that always keeps me in check is just thinking that, they don't work for me. It's actually the reverse. Like, I'm working for them to make or strengthen their craft in general. So again, it's not about like how can I force you to stay at TribalScale and make you be good at engineering or product and vice versa. It's more like how can I help you grow your craft so that you're going to be successful wherever you go, whether it be hopefully still at TribalScale, maybe your next opportunity, but like how do you take it to the next level, and how can I guide you and give you the right opportunities for you to get there?
That's great.
Yeah, I think to add to that, so I can't remember who in leadership said it, but somebody was saying, this is a long journey and people are going to be here for a certain amount of time. But the reality is people nowadays, they don't stay in one place for a long time. But you want to, even if they're not still at TribalScale, you still want to maintain those relationships. You want people to leave with a pleasant experience. And I think you only get that if you really understand what the people want. I think it's really a success if somebody leaves TribalScale and says, I love my time here, and I recognize that I need something that currently this company can't provide, but I had like a blast, and I'm sad to leave. So, and I feel like we mostly have that right now, and that makes me happy for sure.
Yeah, makes me happy that all of you are so people-centric. We did good. But just the follow-up question is, why did you all decide to stay at TribalScale and move up into management positions?
You want to start, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think at the end of the day, it's that growth and opportunity. Just reflecting back on my time here, when I first started, there was a need for just like engineering bodies to begin with. So I was able to kind of, just go back to coding, which is what I was doing before, and kind of develop my technical skills. But then, after a good period of time when we had more people, I was able to kind of shift back into product management, which was kind of my interest as well. So with that kind of opportunity, I was able to build my craft, work on a large range of projects from like, enterprise to startups to like musicians that I like to like famous rappers, like actually being in their apartment in New York. So that was a really crazy experience. And then after that, my next phase for me was like, how do I grow my leadership qualities, right? So that's when my interest in the people management side kind of, grew a lot more. So being, outfitted with that opportunity was really great for me. And again, I've been doing it for almost, I think, 7 months now, but like over the 7 months, I think I learned a lot about the other side of things, right? And in terms of understanding what a report wants, because I've been in that same shoe before, and I know kind of like when I was in that shoe, like what was I expecting from my manager. So trying to apply the things that, in retrospect, that I really was looking for these core qualities of being able to apply that to them. So again, it's an opportunity. There's always something new. And like our business is shifting so much in a positive way, and there's like so many, we're really ambitious with what we do, but again, we have a plan for it, which is why I think it's really cool.
Yeah, great answer.
Anything to add, Lawton?
Yeah, so I think it's crazy to think back that I started TribalScale. I mean, I guess now getting close to 3 years, but it seems like forever ago. I definitely had no idea what I was doing. But at that time, I just wanted to grow technically, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, I got to pair with some of our founders, work directly with them, and they really knew their stuff, and that was a great experience. And with the pair programming that we do, I was able to quickly learn so many different technologies, which was exciting. So, I mean, when I was going through that phase, I wasn't even thinking about, I was just so enraptured. Enraptured, is that the right word? I don't know. I feel like that's wrong, but I was so engrossed. That's the word I'm looking for. There we go.
Come on, rely, Lawton. Right.
In what I was doing, that I almost had blinders on a little bit. And then moving into management, it was just, I feel like being at TribalScale, I just grown this hunger to learn new things and try new things out, and it was just an opportunity to try something. And I thought at first that it would just be me growing my interpersonal skills a little bit and helping with mentorship, but what's been great is that as leadership realizes that we need to improve communications from floor to leadership, trying to be the mouthpiece for the floor on how we can improve processes, trying things, sometimes failing in a pretty big scale, and actually having the ability to have a voice that has impact. It's been really exciting.
No, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, for me, what's been keeping me here is very similar, a lot of learning and growth. To rewind a little bit, like before I started, I hadn't done much coding before. Like I had a couple co-ops where I did some web stuff and things like that, but they really just took a chance on me. So I got really lucky, and like as Lawton mentioned, like pairing with JB and some of the founders early on to like learn my craft, that was super, super helpful and really accelerated my learning and growth. And as the company progressed, there were more and more opportunities for me to get involved in, and they always just had that trust in me to understand, like, okay, maybe he doesn't have that much experience and this is like a stretch, but like, let's go for it. And having that trust from the founding team and other leaders who have joined since then, like that's been huge to kind of help me keep learning and growing, and the same thing with management now.
Do you find yourself as managers passing down those key points that helped you grow? For example, the empowerment piece and just trusting in your reports to just do it. And
yeah, totally. Like I always try and encourage them to have that same attitude.
I try and do that just with everyone, not just my reports. I don't limit it to people that I have one-on-ones with. I like sitting like down beside somebody and just being like, hey, how's it going? And then I don't know, giving my maybe useful, maybe useless advice.
Yeah, your 2 cents.
Exactly.
Perfect. What is your biggest career advice?
I'll go with this one. I think something that I've learned is that you spend too much of your time at work to be doing something that you don't enjoy.
Yeah.
That you're not challenged by. I think it's really easy to kind of get stuck in a place just because you're worried about change. Or you're worried about what people will think if you kind of have to restart at ground zero. And I think, there's a lot to be said about just, going out trying different things, taking risks on things, especially if you're young and like early on in your career. The longer you stay somewhere, I think the harder it is to leave. And so, to try things out, try and learn as much as you can early on.
Yeah, no, it's great. How about you guys?
So mine's a little cliche, but I would just say it's to stay true to yourself. And I mean, we hear that all the time, but in our society, it's so easy to follow this formula, especially in like Western society, of like going to school, get a job, get married, have kids, and just go down this path that it's what you're supposed to do. And even when I finished school and I took the job at Scotiabank, it was a pretty well-paying job, like right out of school, and I just learned like everything I was doing was for the wrong reasons, and I just wasn't thinking about what was really important to me, like at a core level. So I definitely encourage like a lot of self-reflection and introspection to figure out like what it is that really interests you. My main goal when I left Scotiabank was just to find a job that I didn't hate Monday morning, like walking in, right?
Happy on Monday, right?
That was my only requirement. I wasn't trying to get anything else out of it. And when I came to TribalScale, I found that I was like loving coming into work every day. Like everyone was so chill. I was learning a ton, especially early on when I didn't know anything. So that was my main goal, but it was only because I really thought about what interested me and like the types of things I want to work on. And I mean, you spend so much of your time at work, like you should like it a little bit, right? And so to me, that comes back to just aligning what you do as a career with your own personal values.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I like that same, and I feel the same way. Like if you just wake up, on a Monday morning and you're just like, I don't mind going to work. Like I have stuff I want to do. It's like it's actually like the greatest feeling ever, as opposed to like a similar situation with me, like back in my internships, when I was going through undergrad, where I think it's very similar to your theme. I think I just stayed too close to my comfort zone. And again, upon like reflection, maybe I should have done a little bit more, or took a bigger risk in kind of like applying for jobs. But I was nervous at the time, and I was like, oh, will I get it or not? Let's just pick like an easy route. It was the job nature was like, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot, but it was like repetitive, and it's like I could have probably learned more. But I think over the last couple of years, at least here, like I've kind of rectified that and kind of took the harder route in terms of just like, leaving like pivotal, established, everything's like good to go, and just coming here with like no expectations. We don't know if it's going to succeed or not, and like going for it. So yeah, same kind of theme of like, don't be in your comfort zone and like feel challenged. If you don't feel challenged in your day-to-day work, like it's probably not the best place for you.
Yeah, our leadership team always says, don't feel comfortable or don't be comfortable. Yeah. So I think that goes for everyone, not only in the company, but just in general in their own careers. If the moment you start becoming complacent and comfortable in your job, then, reevaluate what are you doing.
I think another point that I was just thinking about now is I think what a lot of people struggle with is imposter syndrome as well.
Yes.
Everyone thinks that
Still?
Yeah, totally, every day.
Yeah, everyone thinks that they're not good enough or they're like the
100%,
dumbest person in the room. And I think that's why a lot of people stay in their comfort zone, because they're, worried if they, apply to other things, like they're worried about the rejection or looking stupid or whatever. Or, in meetings too, asking like a dumb question when you start off. And I think the reality is everyone questions themselves. Everyone at certain points has no idea what they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to look dumb, and you'll do way better.
Yeah, if you're like the dumbest in a room or whatever, you're gonna learn the most. So it's like, the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one point I'd just like to add to that in terms of like when you're starting off your career, the advice I also give is try and maximize learning, which we've talked about a lot, and also take a lot more risks, because as you get older and have more commitment, or you may or may not start a family, it's like that taking those risks may not be viable. But when you're young, and I mean, I can only speak for myself, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're all like relatively privileged that we're even here, we're able to work at a company like TribalScale. I think if we took any crazy risk, we'd always have like a safety net to kind of catch us. So whether that's going and starting a business or something like that, like definitely do it earlier in your career, because you just have less things to worry about, I suppose.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's great. So what do you miss most about the early years of TribalScale? You know, all of you have started in, you know, definitely day one. So what do you miss most about working in a small company versus now we're almost 230 employees? What's some things that you miss and some things that you love?
I mean, I think for me, it's like the thing I miss most being able to have that like close relationship and getting to know everyone, but like beneath the work level, just because of sheer volume, right? We have like 3 offices, 200 plus employees. It's really hard to kind of have that intimate, like close relationship. But I think again at the same time though, it's like it's part of growing up, right? It can't be. We're not going to be interacting with everybody on like an everyday basis, but I think that's just part of scaling, and I think we have different means to kind of still kind of get everybody to collaborate, whether it be tech events or just like during remote sessions, lunch and learns that we do within the product team. We dial in the remote product managers from the Irvine office, so we still get that cross collaboration sometimes.
Yeah. How about you, Ainan?
I think we touched on it earlier in some of the other questions, but definitely like the real like tribe family vibe was like really special. And like I remember we would literally the whole office would go out for lunch together on like a Friday.
Could you imagine our office doing it now?
And it was possible if we had like 20, 30 people. I would not go a day without talking to every single person on some level. And then I started noticing like as we grew like 30, 40, it's like, whoa, like I didn't talk to so-and-so today. Like that's kind of weird. And then like that started happening more and more. And it's just different. It's not that it's not good anymore, but it's definitely felt more like a tight-knit family in the early days. And that's probably what I miss most.
Yeah, it's funny what Ainan mentions, the where our conference name Takeover came from. I'm pretty sure is what we used to call our Friday lunch takeover.
Right.
Is the
we used to be like 20 deep, and the restaurants would be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
No reservation?
No.
No, of course not.
That was the original TribalScale takeover.
Yes,
Oh my
it was. Friday lunches.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add there. I think it's just the intimacy of an office when it's a small group. We were all literally in one big open office space. Now we're in several offices, and the office here in Toronto has grown to the point where you can't see everyone. It's and we're expanding now into another floor even. And I think that goes across not just the office itself, but a lot of the cadences we do now. Like we have these demos, we have stand up, and it's to get everyone comfortable is more of a process. It's less. It doesn't feel quite as much like, oh, I'm just sitting in somebody's living room and like chatting. It's more like an office, which is natural.
Yeah.
It's also part of the reason is because the growth is exponential, right? As opposed to like more gradual, where people start to come together slowly. Now it's just like boom, like
30 hires. There we go.
Next week we have 10 new hires.
Yeah.
I mean, like September or August, it was like that, right?
Yeah, I think Rachel asked me today, how many new hires do you have next week? And I was like, oh, only 2. And she's like, wow, that's crazy. I'm like, not compared to 30. Yeah. Everything is okay.
I remember I used to do this thing where anytime someone got hired, I made a point to go and have a conversation with them on their first day. That's actually not possible now, like physically, right?
Yeah.
And like as we scale, like we're doing cool things like coffee buddies and stuff like that, but it's definitely not the same, right? And then you could build, like Leo said, the personal connections.
Yeah. What do you guys like doing? What do you guys like about in the present day about TribalScale and the growth?
I think something that's really helped out is the organization. Before you had a problem, it was kind of exciting. You could figure it out on your own, or you could try and find somebody who might help. But really, you had no idea who to go to with problems. And because it was a small group, we didn't really need process, or like we had a vague idea or a vision of how we wanted to structure ourselves. But that was kind of all in everyone's head, and I think it was easy to have that oversight. But now as we've grown, we've really started to hone in on our process. We can give people roles where it just focuses on their strengths, and they don't have to kind of cover things that maybe they're not as excited by, or just maybe are a bit of blindsides for them. So I think that's been nice to kind of, like for myself, when I first started at TribalScale, first I did Android work, and then I was doing like web front end work and then React stuff, and then I had to keep jumping around to different technologies and helping out because there just wasn't that bandwidth, and now I can really focus on back end work technology that I'm more excited by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Leo?
I think for me, it's probably just like the way that we're creative and growing our business. I think 3 years ago, or like when we first started, it was just like TribalScale's just services. We work with clients, but over the last 3 years, it's like we're really ambitious with how to grow the business, finding interesting work, right? So like the concept of venture studios, I think is super interesting, right? Like getting into productization, coming up with our own products, and going for ideas that we internally come up with. So just being really ambitious with kind of the ability to do different things. And even like right now, I think the management team, we're going through an exercise of setting kind of our goals for next year. And I think we have a lot of really good, again, the theme of opportunities to work on cool stuff as opposed to like the repetitiveness of just like a standard services job, right? We're doing like ventures, we're getting into like transformation where we're like actually teaching people how to be more effective in executing, a roadmap or being more agile and so forth. So just like the type of work is really interesting, I think, to me.
Yeah, with growth always comes opportunity.
Yeah.
So you're either with it or you're not, I guess. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, but what both Leo and Lawton said, I definitely agree with. Lawton touched on process, which you don't really see when you're a small company, but everything needs to scale properly. And so all the problems that you face are that much more complex because it's not only solving the problem, it needs to be solved in a way that actually scales across an organization, which is not easy. And to Leo's point, the stuff that we work on, it's not just services anymore. They're just bigger, cooler things, whether it's like conferences we're throwing or the complexity of the projects and different platforms that we work on. It's the challenges are just bigger and more exciting. So
Yeah, that's great. Any last points to add from any of you?
If you want to work at TribalScale's, referrals.
Yep. Only talk to Leo, nobody else.
Yeah, you guys, I feel like all three of us, anyone who's interested in TribalScale can reach out. I'm way more responsive than Leo. So
Yeah.
Anyone have a funny story from the early days that they want to share? I'm trying to think of one.
It's hard. Like I was thinking about this when we were like planning for it. It's like we have so many stories, but when you like are put on the spot to think of one, it's like, oh, I can't remember.
I remember how crappy the Wi-Fi was in that first office. I have this image of like Mitch like pressed against the glass on the phone with a client, and I don't know. I just remember him looking at me like. Yeah, like you'd always have to go like right to the edge of the room to get any Wi-Fi.
Wow. Technology
or signal.
company
Yeah.
with no Wi-Fi.
Yeah. I just remember him looking at me like, "What are we doing here?"
I remember my first day was pretty funny. Leo and I started the same day, but Leo I think knew some people and I knew nobody, and it was such a strange experience starting where you get there on your first day and it's you. One other guy, and then 8 co-op students. And you're like, is this a real company? Or is this, it's such a, bootstrap. We're gonna figure this out all together. We're gonna set the computers up. When I actually came in,
You set the computers up.
I don't remember anymore, but I do remember coming into my interview and. All the founders were there putting up like the whiteboards and making the desks like while I was being interviewed. So that was a fun experience.
Wow. So
it all turned out okay, but it was a very
we're fully set up now.
Yeah.
But
Now we have IT. Now we have everything.
There was a story when I think like the first month in, where like I asked Mitch, I'm like, can we get like a Rolly whiteboard, right? Because I used to use them all the time. And he's like, yeah, go look at the price. And I was like, oh, they're like $400. I'm like, they're $400 for a rolling whiteboard? And we're like, yeah, we probably can't afford it at this time. So what we ended up doing is put like a giant whiteboard on just like a chair, and I would just wheel it around. So that
That's
was our
amazing, yeah.
alternative. But yeah, I think we're in a better state now where we can probably afford one rolling whiteboard.
I think you guys have
Yeah.
one on the product side, don't you? Yeah, you got one. We need more of those.
We made it.
Yeah.
Rolling whiteboard.
We made it.
All right. Well, that's everything. Thank you so much for our listeners for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. Hope you all had some insight. We got some great tips and tricks out of this. And if you are looking into TribalScale, we have like 30 open positions. So please feel free to check out our website and our careers page. But with that, I think we'll just tune out.